Hello and welcome to EDH Anonymous, where we spend as little as possible on production so we can spend more money on cards. Today I want to show you guys my personal commander deck. So a little backstory on my commander experience. I only just recently got back into Magic, but a few years back, around the 2012 pre-constructed commander decks, I was playing a lot with my friends, but we only ever had the pre-con decks because my friend's dad would go out and buy them, but he wasn't super into Commander, so he never really played around with them. But now that I'm back into Commander for myself, I decided I'm just gonna start from scratch and build my deck completely from the ground up instead of starting with a pre-con. So this is the first deck I've ever built from the ground up all by myself, and we use Rielle the Everwise. She costs a 1, a blue, and a red. A legendary human wizard. She's a 0/3. She gets +1/+0 for every instant and sorcery in the grave, and whenever I discard one or more cards for the first time each turn, draw that many cards. So I don't really use her quite so much for those abilities. They both, well, for the rather +1/+0, that one has its use, and I'll get to that in a little bit, but mostly I take advantage of the discarding one or more cards for the first time, drawing that many cards, so I get to draw a lot of extra cards by cycling. Or not cycling, filtering, by filtering. And then here we have some tokens we use for the deck. Always feels very, very good to actually have the tokens you need. Most of them in this case. I have a copy token, I have a Jaya emblem, and I have a clue token. So let's get down into this deck and see what's inside. So first, let's talk about our strategy. The ultimate end goal is to use one of these 4 spells to end the game. I have multiple other win conditions in here, but these are the main 4. Jaya's Immolating Inferno, red X, deals X damage to each of up to 3 targets, so I can take out all 3 opponents with this in one fell swoop. We have Burn from Within, blows up a player or a creature, but if the creature has Indestructible, it loses Indestructible. We have Red Sun Zenith because it recurs, and we can constantly use it if we keep on drawing it. And then we have Expansion and Explosion because it has both of the effects that I want most for this deck, which is a red X spell to blow something up for a bunch, and I can copy something of mana cost 4 or less. Now how are we going to use these? We're going to copy them a bunch. We have Chandra the Firebrand, her -2. When you cast your next instant or sorcery spell this turn, copy that spell. Ral Storm Conduit, -2. When you cast your next instant or sorcery spell, copy it. And with him, whenever I cast or copy an instant or sorcery, he deals a damage to an opponent or an opponent's planeswalker. So he can come in very handy even if I'm not using necessarily a damage spell, I can copy something a bunch of times and have him deal a bunch of damage to my enemies. Then we have Reiterate, Double Cast, Dual Casting, Narset's Reversal, Dualcaster Mage, Echo Mage, Reverberate, Wild Ricochet, Lithoform Engine, Pyromancer's Goggles, Primal Amulet, the Mirai Conjecture, Thousand Year Storm, and Fire Servant. Now all of these spells are going to amplify the amount of damage that one of my red spells will do. Each one of these copies it. Dual Casting is an enchantment that allows me, it puts an enchantment on a creature that allows me to copy. Narset's Reversal returns the spell to its owner's hand and then copies it. Dualcaster Mage is a creature that flashes into copy. Echo Mage is a level up creature that copies. Can copy twice at level 4+. Reverberate, instant speed copy. Wild Ricochet, instant speed copy, although this can help deflect a target that's coming at you, and then copy it to amplify it back at the opponent. Lithoform Engine, in particular, is one of my favorites in this card because it synergizes so well with pretty much everything, because I can copy an activated or triggered ability, say for example Rielle's discard ability. I can activate that again and draw a bunch of extra cards. I can copy an instant or sorcery spell for 3 mana or a permanent spell for 4 mana, and using that on something like Fire Servant can end the game all on its own. With that combo, I used one of my red X spells for X equals 5 and translated that into 60 damage with how much copying was going on. Then we have Pyromancer's Goggles. Copies any red spell, instant or sorcery spell that I use this red mana to cast. Primal Amulet. Instant and sorceries cost 1 less. Put a bunch of charge counters on it whenever you do, and it turns into the Primal Wellspring, which is arguably one of the best cards in this deck because of this. Turns into a land, add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool, and when that mana is spent to cast an instant or sorcery spell, any instant or sorcery spell, copy it. Very, very powerful card, if I can get it to transform, which I will be casting a lot of spells each turn, ideally. Then we have the Mirai Conjecture. This one is a little more situational. It'll get me an instant card back, then a sorcery card back, and then it'll copy anything I play for that turn. So it has the potential to set up an explosive turn, but it also forecasts what I'm going to do. Once it gets to 3, you know I'm going to be playing a lot of big spells. Thousand Year Storm, also one of the better cards in this deck. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery, copy it for each other instant or sorcery spell you've cast before it this turn. So basically what this says, if I cast, here's an example, Think Twice to draw a card. If I have Thousand Year Storm out on the board, Think Twice will trigger once. And then I play a Reverberate on it, Thousand Year Storm will trigger, copying the Reverberate, so I'll be able to copy the Think Twice twice. And then if I copy it again with any other spell, it'll copy it 3 times. So it can snowball very quickly into something very scary. That's our main win condition. Getting that, and then Fire Servant. Deals, if a red instant or sorcery spell would deal damage, it deals double damage instead. So with 2 of these, it would deal double, then double. So with Lithoform Engine, this can end a game all on its own. That's our main win condition. We have a couple others here, mostly for fun. My favorite is using Niv-Mizzet, both Parun and the Firemind. The rest of his abilities almost don't matter. He's nice because Parun is nice because he can't be countered, and he lets me draw extra cards whenever a player casts an instant or sorcery, which is really nice. But the main trigger here is that whenever I draw a card, they each deal 1 damage to target creature or player. Firemind deals creature or player, Parun deals any target. So either way, if I draw a bunch of cards, I can shoot a lot of damage, especially if I have both out. Now, how am I going to draw those cards, you ask? Well, first, we have a couple of Planeswalkers here that allow us to dig through our deck. These aren't necessarily draw card Planeswalkers, but Narset in particular is very useful because each opponent can't draw more than 1 card each turn, so that stops my opponents from getting more card advantage than me, while I have my entire deck in my hand, basically. Same with Rielle, Izzet Viceroy. His main benefit here is his -3. He deals damage to target creature equal to the number of instants or sorceries in your graveyard and in exile. So that can be a big hit to just wipe a creature off the face of the planet. Jace just lets me draw cards. He actually does say draw a card, so that will trigger anything that says when you draw a card. Blue Sun Zenith can be very explosive if it's copied. I can draw a lot of cards and shoot a lot of damage in an instant. Same with Seagate Restoration, although this one triggers a bit weirdly. Because it says draw cards equal to the number of cards in your hand +1, when you cast it and it's copied even once, say I have 6 cards in my hand, I have to draw 7 cards for the first trigger, but then I have 7 + 6, I have 13 cards in my hand, so for the second trigger I would have to draw another 14 cards. So that can very quickly snowball into you drawing your entire deck. Now, I plan on putting Laboratory Maniac into this deck very soon, solely for the purpose where, in a pinch, I can just draw my whole deck and win the game like that. Now, another way I can take advantage of all that draw power is the Locust God. He's very helpful because he gives me blockers. Whenever I draw a card, create a 1/1 blue and red flying insect token with flying and haste. And he lets me draw and then discard a card, but it's kind of expensive, so I'm not going to use that one, his draw and discard ability, too often, because I have so many other cheaper ones, which I'll show you in just a bit. He takes big advantage of all that card draw and can, in a pinch, get me an entire board of blockers to defend myself, assuming everything doesn't have trample. Now, next I want to talk about the draw and discard outlets I have. This stack right here is my draw and discard outlets. Gaia Reach Sanitarium is a favorite of mine, especially in conjunction with Narset Parter of Veils, because it makes it so other players can't draw more than one card each turn. If I activate this on my turn, or they've already drawn a card, all they do is discard a card, because each player draws, then discards. And then, of course, if I activate this with Rielle on the board, I draw a card, discard a card, then draw another card. Chandra Ablaze, she has a wheel effect. Each player discards his or her hand, then draws 3 cards, so I benefit off of both of these triggers if either Niv-Mizzet is on the board or Rielle is on the board, because I'll discard a bunch of cards, draw a bunch of cards, then draw 3 more. Same with her +1, discard a card, and if it's red, she deals 4 damage to target creature or player. And most of my cards are either red or red and blue, so she can very quickly deal a lot of damage. Next we have Jaya Ballard. She is both helpful in casting spells because she +1s to add a bunch of red mana for instants and sorceries, but she also lets you discard up to 3 cards, then draw that many cards. So I discard 3, I draw 3, and then I draw 3. Next we have Facet Reader. Just a common, but very powerful in this deck. For only 1 mana and tap, draw a card, then discard a card. So 2 cards, 1 into the grave, not a big deal, because I have so many replica spells that if I lose one, I have another that will do the same thing. Next we have Jaya Ballard, the Task Mage. This one's a fancy version. I'm borrowing this card from my roommate. It's a very beautiful promo card. Jaya Ballard, Task Mage. She has a bunch of different discard outlets. I can destroy a blue permanent, I can deal 3 damage to target creature or player, and I can deal 6 damage to each creature and each player with a discard a card as an additional cost. So these are massively beneficial spells. You know, that's creature removal right there. That can be a huge defense move. But it also draws me cards because I'm discarding. Mercurial Chemister. He lets me draw 2 cards, or I can discard a card and deal damage to a target creature equal to the discarded card's mana cost. So this is also draw and removal potential. And then we have Tormenting Voice and Wild Guest. They're basically the same thing. They have different mana costs, 1 and a red versus 2 reds, although they have the exact same effect. As an additional cost to cast this spell, discard a card, then draw 2 cards. What's so great about this spell is that if I copy it, because I only have to pay this additional cost to cast this spell once it's copied, I can discard 1 card and then draw a bunch more cards by copying this, either once or multiple times. So this has the potential to draw out my deck almost, under the right circumstances. And we also have a couple of very important spells in here that I want to talk about. I have some miscellaneous draw spells, but here are 2 of the most important cards that will take advantage, or rather boost and then take advantage of those draws. Teferi's Ageless Insight. If you would draw a card, except the first one you draw in each of your draw steps, draw 2 instead. So comboing out with this and Seagate Restoration or Blue Sun Zenith can very quickly draw my whole deck. Not a problem. So with Niv-Mizzet or Parun or the Firemind, I can shoot a player down before I even draw my deck in a single player game, but in a multiplayer game, I would be able to Lab Maniac draw my deck in no time. Plus it helps me dig faster for the spells that I do need if that win condition isn't available to me at the time. Then we also have Firemind's Research. I misspoke earlier. This doesn't take advantage of the draw cards, this just draws me more cards. Whenever you cast instants and sorceries, put a charge counter on it, and then remove 2 for some mana to draw a card, or remove 5 and it deals 5 damage to any target. I don't know why this card has writing on it. I bought it just the other day at a local game shop, and unfortunately I didn't notice it until after I bought it. They had other copies, but I just completely blanked and didn't see the marking on the card. I'm not upset about it, but it's not a perfect world. What are you going to do? So with all that card draw and all that burn, how are we going to defend ourselves? How are we going to make sure that we have enough mana? So first we have our control stack. I should talk about this first. Reliquary Tower. No maximum hand size. Very important for a deck like this. If I'm going to be drawing that many cards, I don't want to have to discard all of them, especially since if I draw 50 cards and I haven't discarded anything that turn, I discard down to hand size, Rielle will trigger and I will have to draw that many cards. Because it's not a you may on her ability, it's a you have to. So I could very easily accidentally mill myself out just by discarding down to hand size. So Reliquary Tower is an absolute must in this deck. Same with Mage Ring Network. This is a storage land that adds lots of colorless mana. This, if I get this early enough, it can have a huge payoff late in the game to allow me to completely obliterate my enemies with all of the extra mana pumped into a red X spell. So all that aside, all that win condition-y stuff aside, we have a couple of other things to get through. First we have control. Lots of control, just to make sure that my spells are protected. This, all the way up to here, is all counter spells. We have Desertion, counter a spell, and if it's an artifact or creature, put it onto the battlefield under your control instead of the owner's graveyard. So you can do some big damage with this if you play it right. Mystic Confluence, Devious Cover-Up, Anti-Cognition, an amazing commander card. I misread it the first time I saw this. It says counter target creature or planeswalker spell unless its controller pays 2 mana. If an opponent has 8 or more cards in their graveyard, instead counter that spell, then scry 2. See, I thought this meant that if an opponent has 8 or more cards in their graveyard, they had to still pay the 2 in order to prevent the counter, but I got to scry 2 anyway. If they have 8 or more cards in their graveyard, which is likely in a commander game very quickly to happen, you just straight up counter it, then scry 2 for 2 mana. 2 mana! It's absurd. Ionize, deal some damage. You can copy this over and over again and make it a surprisingly huge hit. Supreme Will has the potential to draw me some cards too. Unwind, untap your lands. If I make this cheaper, I can untap a lot more lands than I spent paying to play that. Wizard's Retort, counter target spell. Since I got a lot of wizards, I figured has the potential to just be a counter spell or a cancel, and both are good. Both are good. And then we have Mind Swipe. This is another red X potential spell. It counters target spell unless its controller pays X, and then deals X damage to that spell's controller. So if I manage to pull out this card, counter something for a big number, and then copy it a bunch on my opponent's turn suddenly, not only do they have to pay X multiple times, they're also going to be taking X damage multiple times. So that can be a insult to injury win condition on it all on its own. I'll counter your spell, and with that counter, I'll blow you up. So these are going to protect the things we cast as best as possible. Next we have Release to the Wind. These are non-counterspell control cards. Exile target non-land permanent. For as long as that card remains exiled, its owner may cast it without paying its mana cost. So what I can do with this, if someone keeps targeting my commander and I really need her to stay on the board, I can Release to the Wind her, exile her, and instead of sending her to the command zone, actually put her in exile. And then for as long as that card remains exiled, whenever I need her again, whenever I feel it's safe to bring her back out, I can just play her again on my turn for free. No commander tax necessary. Then we have Fumble. Bounce a creature to its owner's hand and then gain control of all auras and equipments that were attached to it, then attach them to another creature. So this can completely shut down a Voltron deck. Anything that's playing with lots of equipments, which honestly pretty much any aggro deck will have a lot of equipments in it, you can steal all of it, put it on your creature, and attack them with their own stuff. Definitely a good feeling to be able to pull this one off. I keep it in here, despite it being relatively conditional, because of my play group, a lot of them play equipments, so having the ability to steal those equipments, like a Black Blade Reforged or a Sword of Fire and Ice or something, that can change the game entirely. And then we have Propaganda, just to disincentivize people from attacking us. It helps protect us, especially in the early game, so that way I'm not constantly getting hit by my enemies, because they know what my deck is capable of. They know what can happen if they allow my board state to get a little too strong with my artifacts or lands. Next we have some mana rocks. Izzet Locket lets me draw some cards if I don't need it anymore. Gilded Lotus, just too good with Lithoform Engine. If I get the chance to copy this, it may cost 9 mana to end up copying it, but that's a lot of free mana on the board for not a lot of mana pumped into it. For only 9 mana, I get an additional 6. That is very, very powerful. Soul Ring, absolutely staple in every commander deck. If you're playing a commander deck and you don't have a Soul Ring, then I really feel bad for you. I really do. Soul Ring's the best. Izzet Signet, not the greatest mana rock, but helps with some color fixing. Sapphire Medallion will make all blue spells we cast cost 1 less. This has already proven very, very, very helpful, because I have this one that makes blue spells cost 1 less to cast, and over here on the Primal Amulet, it also makes instants and sorceries 1 less to cast, which that's the majority of my spells anyway. So next we have Elixir of Immortality. Always useful, always helpful. You never know when you're going to get Bajuka bogged or mill yourself out. This is a good way to help prevent that. Oblivion Stone always helps to have board wipes. I've got a few more off to the side here that I'll talk about in a little bit. This lets me be a little more selective with my board wipe, though. I'm allowed to put fate counters onto permanents and then destroy everything that doesn't have a fate counter. So if this sticks around for a little while, I can protect some of my stuff and then blow up the board. But if it's going to get targeted right away, which it pretty much always does, it'll force me to blow up the entire board right away, which I'm fine with. That's kind of the joy of this card. You can place it down and you don't have to blow it up right away. You can just hold the threat over everyone that, hey, if you do something I don't like, I can blow up the board at any time, and I will make sure to have the mana open to do so. Finally, Tamiyo's Journal. Probably the most underrated tutor I've ever seen. This card was like $2. I was kind of surprised that it was so cheap. At the beginning of your upkeep, investigate, put a clue token onto the board, and then tap, sack 3 clues, go get a card, any card, and put it in your hand. Clues already tap 2 to sack and draw a card, so that's strong enough on its own, but being able to tutor for 3 clues, that very, very strong card. It may take a little while to get to that 3, because it's at the beginning of your upkeep you get another clue. But if you're playing this early, by the time it goes off, you know what you're looking for. You know what you need. Next we have some board wipes that I want to show you. Slagstorm never fails to absolutely wreck a board, especially with even one copy spell. The chances of the majority of creatures having more than 6 toughness is very slim, and I can copy this multiple times if necessary to wipe the board as needed. Plus, if I'm at enough life, or even slightly more than everyone, I can potentially kill everyone without killing myself, if I have enough life, of course. Next we have Star of Extinction. Blow up a land, 20 damage to each creature and planeswalker. Very effective damage board wipe. It's come in handy time and time again. I'm probably never taking this card out of the deck. It's amazing. Hell, just blowing up someone's reliquary tower or something like that with this card. The damage aside, like, yeah, it's a great board wipe, but I can also blow up the land that's giving you all of the advantage right now. Because there are some really powerful lands in this game that people kind of forget to look at, how powerful some lands can be. Finally, Cyclonic Rift. Now, little story. I picked this one up at my LGS. It's beautiful, it's full art, and it's shiny. I did not intend to buy such a ridiculously expensive card. $30 is insane for a card, in my opinion. The non-full art regular, like the standard print Return to Ravnica foil card cost twice as much as this one. I was completely surprised, and though this and that other Cyclonic Rift were the only two they had in the store, unfortunately, so I had to go with this one, which, yeah, you win some, you lose some. In this case, we won a sick card that is absolutely beautiful, but we lost like $35 on it, so. Next, almost to the end, we got some extra turn spells. You can't have a control deck without some extra turn spells. Karn's Temporal Sundering lets you take an extra turn after this one. I like this one in particular because if in conjunction with Narset's Reversal, you copy this spell and then bounce it to its owner's hand. Karn's Temporal Sundering exiles itself after it's cast. So you play it, cast Narset's Reversal, it'll only resolve once because it will be bounced to your hand, but you won't have to exile it, and you'll get to play it again next turn. Why that's so great with Temporal Sundering is, yeah, it gets exiled afterwards so I can reuse it, but most importantly, it bounces a non-land permanent to its owner's hand. So I can set up a couple of extra turns and take care of a couple of threats that are in my way, preventing me from winning on those extra turns. Nexus of Fate. This one's just too good. Instant speed, and it shuffles back into its owner's library whenever it's put into a graveyard from anywhere. And Temporal Mastery. Take an extra turn for 7 mana at sorcery speed with a miracle cost for 2. A 2 mana extra turn, which comes you get the miracle cost on this a lot more than you would expect. It's the only miracle card I have in this deck, but dang. 2 mana for an extra turn. I can turn that into 5 extra turns pretty easily. So that those 3 cards right there can end a game all on their own, technically. Next we have a few cards. These I consider my silly cards. They're the odd one out cards that can still win the game for me. First we have Thud, an Act of Treason. With the right amount of copies, or just the right creature stolen, Thud, as an additional cost to cast this spell, sacrifice a creature. So you only gotta sacrifice 1 creature. And if you copy it a bunch, you'll deal all that damage to any target. So you can throw, for example, I've got Rielle out, maybe I've got 15 instants and sorceries in the grave. She's a 15 power creature, If I thud her 3 times or more, I can kill someone in commander damage. I can kill 1 or more people in commander damage alone. Well, not commander damage, because this is non-combat damage. Commander damage has to be combat damage. But with enough copies, 1 Rielle, 1 3-mana 0/3 creature can completely blow up everyone with her face. Act of Treason can act in a very similar way. Copied enough times, I can steal the entire board of creatures, swing out with them, and win just on that alone. Or, the best combo, the reason I put this combo in the first place, steal someone's creature, hit them with it, throw it at their face. Never gets old. Always feels good to pull that one off, even if it doesn't change the game ultimately, it leads to a very fun interaction. And finally, we have Charix the Raging Isle. He's a 0/17 super wall. He doesn't have defender, but boy can he block. He gets +X, -X until end of turn for 3 mana, where X is the number of islands you control. I've got 3 basic islands in the deck, and 1 dual land that counts as an island. He's not getting very big. But spells your opponents cast that target him cost 2 more to cast. What can we do with this, you might ask? Well, we can fumble, put a bunch of equipments on him. Here's an example of what happened in the game recently. I fumbled an opponent, stole a few equipments off of him, and turned Charix into a 6/20. 6 power, 20 toughness. I hit him for 6, and then the next turn I used Invert to switch the power and toughness of up to 2 target creatures, and turned him into a 20 power creature and swung for another 20. So this combo ended the game for that player in an instant. You know, he took 26 damage in 2 turns. That's not something you can very easily come back from unless you're playing like mad life game. But this combo is just funny. Like, flat out, it's just funny. Plus, that with Thud has the same effect as with Rielle. You can do a lot of damage with basically 1 card. And then, just so I talk about it, the invent portion of this is basically a tutor for an instant and a sorcery to put them into your hand. 6 mana tutor, but this card comes in clutch all the time. And that's the deck, you know? It's not complete. I've got a few more updates coming to this deck in the future. Got a few more ideas. There's an infinite combo that I'm going to pull off with Reiterate and Mana Geyser. My playgroup is okay with that. Definitely keep an eye out on on combos like that. Make sure your playgroup's okay with it. If they are, cool. If not, don't be an ass. But this deck has just been so much fun to work on. Where it started and where it's come now, you wouldn't even recognize the deck if I showed you the original version. I wasn't even using Rielle as the commander. My win tactic was effectively the same: copy a spell, blow you up for a ton. But it wasn't refined to this extent. Now it is much more consistent and devastating when it goes off. With that, I'm gonna end the video there. I hope everybody enjoyed watching this, learning about my deck and my process and my ideas. I've got a few more videos coming out after this that are going to show off a little bit of gameplay with this deck. A friend of mine spent this past weekend doing a lot of play testing versus each other. He built a tokens deck, and I built this deck, or rather updated this deck after we went to the LGS, and I've got 4 games coming up after this video to show off what this deck is kind of capable of. I know it's only 2 players, so it's not getting the full potential shown off because of things like Jaya's Immolating Inferno. doesn't really do anything in a single player game, but has massive effects on a multiplayer game. But we still got a lot of playtesting done, and we're both very happy with where the decks are now. There's still a few changes I want to make. As I said before, I want to add Lab Maniac, I want to add the Mana Geyser, but aside from that, that's pretty much it. That's pretty much everything that this deck is going to need, unless new cards come out. So, with all that said and done, I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you enjoyed the next videos. If you did, like, comment, subscribe, you know the drill. And stay tuned for more EDH content. I have a new deck that I'm working on that I'm going to be showing off here in a little bit, once it's a little more fleshed out, once I have some cards for it. The deck right now is pretty much just online, and then a half-assed stack of cards that are sitting in a box. So, more on that later. It will be Paco and Haldon, a thieving deck. I'm going to be stealing everything. So that's going to be a lot of fun.